Let's do it. Number 15, the trepanning renaissance. Imagine for a second you're chilling in a cave around 7,000 years ago. Maybe you've got a killer headache, the kind where a few Tylenol in a dark room just aren't going to cut it. You go to the local shaman, who looks at you with a gleam in his eye, reaches for his sharpest rock and says, "Don't worry, this'll fix you right up." What he's about to do is trepanning, the practice of drilling a hole into your skull. Yeah, you heard me, a hole in your head. Now, for the longest time, we all assumed this was some kind of ancient head-poking ritual to let out evil spirits, and in some cases, it definitely was. But archaeological evidence from skulls all over the world shows that the holes often healed, meaning the patient lived. And a bunch of the patients who got this procedure weren't just possessed. They had serious head injuries, skull fractures from combat, or even brain swelling. By creating a tiny hole, the pressure inside the skull would be relieved, which is still a major neurosurgery procedure to this day. The trepanned skulls we've found show clear signs of bone regeneration, which means these prehistoric surgeons had to know what they were doing and how to keep their patients from getting a fatal infection. So when you look at it, a few thousand years ago, the best way to fix a headache was to drill a hole in your skull, because apparently your brain's just a cranky teenager who needs to be told to chill out and release the pressure. Number 14, the magic of maggots. You're a Roman soldier, fresh off a skirmish, and you've got a wound that's getting uglier by the minute. It's swollen, it's festering, and it smells like something died in there. You've heard about the latest medical breakthrough, but you're a little hesitant. The doctor comes over, and instead of a shiny scalpel, he's got a handful of squirming, hungry maggots. He gently places them on your wound, and you're about to freak out, but he tells you to relax. This isn't a torture method, it's maggot debridement therapy, a bizarre practice that surprisingly still gets used today. Maggots, specifically the larvae of the green bottlefly, have a very particular appetite. They only eat dead, necrotic tissue, leaving healthy tissue completely alone. They also secrete an enzyme that dissolves the gunk and goo in a wound, making it easier for them to consume. But the best part? Their little digestive tracts produce powerful antimicrobial compounds that kill off bacteria like MRSA, which is a big problem in modern hospitals. So, while you're lying there, watching a bunch of larvae crawl around on your open flesh, just know that those little creepy crawlies are a living, breathing, and wriggling antibiotic, cleaning you up one bite at a time. It's basically a spa day for your injuries. You're suffering from a bad cough, a scratchy throat, or maybe a fever. In 16th century Europe, you'd visit a doctor who doesn't reach for a stethoscope, but for a jar that looks like dirt. But it's not just dirt, it's mummia, powdered human mummies, ground up and sold as a miracle cure. For nearly 500 years, Europeans believed that consuming ground-up Egyptian mummies could cure a variety of ailments. They thought the mummy's body had a life force that could be transferred to the sick person. This belief arose from a misunderstanding of mumia, which originally referred to a tar-like embalming substance. When the supply of the original mumia ran out, doctors started using actual mummies. Surprisingly, this practice seemed to work, not due to any mystical life force, but because the substance had antiseptic properties. The black tar they sought was sometimes mixed with bitumen, which has antiseptic properties. Embalming ingredients like natron salt and resins could kill bacteria, especially if the patient was already recovering. Thus, a patient might feel better and credit the mummy dust, similar to eating dirt and claiming it cured allergies because recovery was already underway. You're a physician in the 1800s. Your patient has a fever, a bruise, or a nasty cut. What do? You grab a jar of your best little bloodsuckers, leeches. Bloodletting using leeches was standard for centuries, based on the idea that illness was caused by an imbalance of humors. If you had too much blood, you just had to let some out. While most of the time it was a terrible idea, weakening the patient and causing possible infections, sometimes leeches were actually useful. Medicinal leeches secrete chemicals like hirudin and vasodilators. These chemicals prevent blood clotting and widen blood vessels, making them effective in reattaching severed body parts during reconstructive surgery. Leeches draw out excess blood, improving flow. Today, doctors still use leeches in microsurgery to save reattached limbs and skin grafts. While ancestors used them to fix coughs, we use them to save entire appendages, a much better application. Imagine, if you can, a time when doctors thought smoke was a good way to get things moving through your system. In the 18th century, drowning was a huge problem, and they had an equally huge and bizarre solution: the tobacco enema. That's right, a doctor would blow tobacco smoke up a patient's rear end, using a pipe or even a bellows. The idea was that the smoke would warm the body and stimulate respiration and circulation in a person who had seemingly drowned. The thinking was that tobacco was a powerful stimulant, so it would jumpstart a person's life. Now, it turns out that some of this was not entirely wrong. Nicotine is a potent stimulant, and the tobacco smoke itself contains carbon monoxide and other chemicals that would be rapidly absorbed by the large intestine. While it would definitely be a terrible idea to do today, in some cases, the shock and stimulation could, theoretically, cause an unresponsive person's nervous system to kick back into action. We're talking about a time when CPR didn't exist, so this bizarre, last-ditch effort might have given some people a fighting chance. It's the most literal interpretation of lighting a fire under someone that you can possibly imagine. Number 10, the sweet relief of sugar paste. You've just been gashed in a medieval tavern brawl. There's no hospital, no antibiotics, and definitely no Neosporin. Your friendly neighborhood apothecary looks at the wound, and instead of a sterile bandage, they pull out a bowl of something sticky. It's a paste made of honey and sugar. While you might be thinking this is just a way to make your wound extra attractive to flies, it's actually therapeutic sugar paste, and it's shockingly effective. Honey has been used as a wound dressing for centuries, and ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans were all onto something. Both honey and sugar are hypertonic, meaning they have a low water content. When applied to an open wound, they draw moisture out of the wound and into the dressing via osmosis. This not only helps reduce swelling, but more importantly, it dehydrates bacteria, killing them off. The high sugar concentration also creates a hostile environment that most microbes can't survive in. On top of that, honey contains small amounts of hydrogen peroxide, which gives it an extra antibacterial kick. So, in an age without modern medicine, a jar of honey was basically an emergency kit, ready to fight off infection one sticky layer at a time. It's basically the medical equivalent of a bee-powered bioweapon. Number 9. The bone-setting body slam. You've fallen off your horse, and your arm is now bent in a direction it shouldn't be. You're in a world without x-rays or orthopedic surgeons. Your local bone setter approaches, and instead of a gentle, reassuring touch, they grab your arm and violently yank it. Or worse, they might stand on it or even hang you from a beam. This is bone setting, a surprisingly effective but brutal practice. While some doctors were just quacks, many bone setters were highly skilled practitioners who used force to realign fractures and dislocations. They understood basic anatomy and leverage, often by trial and error. Their methods might seem horrific today, but they worked. By applying a rapid, forceful movement, they could pop a dislocated joint back into place. Or set a broken bone, preventing a lifetime of painful deformity. Modern orthopedic doctors use a similar principle, called a reduction, which is why a doctor might pop your shoulder back into place with a quick, hard push. The key difference? Today, you're probably getting a local anesthetic first, and you don't have to worry about the doctor breaking another bone in the process. Number 8, the salt of 1,000 cures. Headache, stomachache, just feeling generally unwell? The ancient Romans had a go-to solution for everything: salt. Not just any salt, but a special blend of salt, herbs, and oils, sometimes applied in a paste or dissolved in water for an internal wash. Now, on the surface, this sounds like just a placebo, but there's a reason it stuck around for so long. For one, salt has a long history of being a powerful antiseptic. A saline solution is still used in hospitals today to clean wounds and prevent bacterial growth. The high salt concentration kills many microbes. Additionally, a salt wash could help with mild infections, and even gargling with salt water can soothe a sore throat. In an era without antibiotics, using salt as a basic disinfectant was a smart, low-tech way to prevent minor problems from becoming major ones. The Romans knew that salt could preserve food, and they made the logical leap that it could also preserve a person's health. The Romans knew that salt could preserve food, and they made the logical leap that it could also preserve a person's health. Number 7, the head-spinning cure for vertigo. You wake up and the world is spinning. You feel dizzy, nauseous, and completely off balance. In ancient China, a doctor might suggest a rather unorthodox cure. They would place a patient on a spinning chair or a swing and spin them around rapidly. You'd think this would just make things worse, but this practice was actually a crude form of what's now known as vestibular rehabilitation therapy. Vertigo is often caused by problems with the inner ear, which is responsible for your sense of balance. Specifically, tiny calcium crystals in the inner ear can get dislodged and float into areas where they shouldn't be, sending confusing signals to the brain. By rapidly spinning the patient, the ancient Chinese were essentially trying to force those crystals to settle back into their proper place, like shaking a snow globe until the glitter settles. Today, physical therapists use a much more controlled version of this, called the Epley maneuver, which involves a series of specific head movements to do the same thing. So while your ancestors were being spun around like a human gyroscope, they were unknowingly tapping into a core principle of modern neurootology. Number 6, snail slime for a sore throat. Feeling a little phlegmy? Got a cough that won't quit? In ancient Greece, the solution was right in your garden. Doctors would prescribe a remedy made from snail slime, or more specifically, a concoction of snails boiled with various herbs. You might think this is just the grossest kind of placebo, but it turns out there's a kernel of truth to this slimy solution. Snail mucus, or mucin, is packed with proteins, antioxidants, and a variety of other compounds. It's naturally soothing and can create a protective barrier, which is why it's still used in some modern cosmetic products to moisturize skin. When consumed, the mucus coats the irritated throat, providing temporary relief from coughing and soreness. While it wouldn't cure a bacterial or viral infection, it could alleviate symptoms and provide comfort, which was a huge part of medicine for most of human history. It's basically the ancient, organic, and far more disgusting version of a throat lozenge. Number 5, shocking fevers into submission. You're a doctor in ancient Rome. Your patient is burning up with a fever, and you're running out of ideas. Suddenly, you remember that electric eel you keep in a tank in the back. You have the patient place their feet in a tub of water, and you drop the eel in. This is not a magic show. It's ichthyotherapy, a strange form of electroshock therapy. The electric discharge from the eel or torpedo fish could, in some cases, cause a sudden muscle contraction and a drop in body temperature. The idea was that the shock would reset the body and break the cycle of fever. While it sounds incredibly dangerous, it's not entirely baseless. The jolt of electricity could stimulate the nervous system and trigger a variety of physiological responses. It's the same kind of weird, high-risk, high-reward thinking that led to defibrillators, just with a live fish instead of a sterile medical device. Number 4, the cold water cure. You've got a raging fever, your body is on fire, and you're hallucinating. You're in a 19th century mental asylum, or maybe just a regular European home, and the doctor's prescription isn't a pill or a poultice. It's a literal dunking in an ice-cold bath. This is hydrotherapy, and while it sounds like the world's most cruel prank, it was surprisingly effective for a variety of conditions, from fevers to what was then called hysteria or madness. The logic was simple. A powerful sudden shock to the system would snap a person out of their illness. We know today that this is a little more complex than just a cold slap in the face. When your body is submerged in cold water, your core temperature drops rapidly. Your blood vessels constrict, and your sympathetic nervous system, the one responsible for your fight or flight response, goes into overdrive. This can be a vital, life-saving measure for someone with heat stroke, for example. The cold shock also triggers a surge of hormones and neurotransmitters, which can have a temporary sedative effect and reduce swelling. So while your ancestors were being dunked like a biscuit in a cup of tea, the shock of it all was actually triggering a physiological reset, forcing their body to calm down and cool off. It was less a cure and more a chaotic last-ditch effort to get your broken internal thermostat to start working again. Number 3, the toothworm myth. You've got a toothache so bad it feels like a tiny jackhammer is going to town on your molars. In ancient Mesopotamia, China, or Egypt, a dentist would examine your mouth and gravely inform you that a toothworm was eating your tooth. This was the reigning theory for dental pain for thousands of years. The treatment for this phantom parasite was often a combination of prayers, strange incantations, and more practically, a concoction of herbs. But sometimes they went straight for the source, using tiny instruments to probe or even drill out the worm. The bizarre thing, this often worked. Not because they actually found a worm. The worm was likely just an exposed nerve or a decaying piece of food, but because the process of probing and cleaning out the decay was a crude form of modern dentistry. The herbs they used often had anti-inflammatory or antiseptic properties, like myrrh or mint. The act of removing the decayed part of the tooth, regardless of the reason, was the real cure. So, even though they were chasing an invisible dental demon, their methods were accidentally on the right track. It's the ultimate example of a flawed scientific hypothesis that still manages to produce some legitimate, albeit gross, results. Number 2, vomit for your health. You ate something weird at a medieval feast, and now your stomach feels like a cauldron of angry, bubbling goo. A doctor arrives and immediately gives you a concoction of herbs and mystery liquids designed to make you throw up. This is emetic therapy, and it was all the rage for centuries. Based on the humoral theory, the idea that illness was caused by an imbalance of the 4 bodily fluids, the goal was to get the bad humors out of your system, and the fastest way to do that was to either induce violent vomiting or a powerful bout of diarrhea. While this sounds like a horrific, self-inflicted torture, there's a sliver of modern medical logic to it. For certain types of poisoning, inducing vomiting is a vital, time-sensitive first aid measure. Ingesting something toxic and then rapidly purging it from your system can be the difference between life and death. Of course, they used emetics for everything from fevers to depression, which was almost always a terrible idea. But when your body has taken in a substance that it cannot tolerate, the ancient, brutal logic of just getting it out of you was, in some rare cases, the correct course of action. It's the most literal form of cleanse you could possibly imagine. Number 1, the cauterization of wounds. You're a warrior in ancient Rome. Your arm has a gaping, bleeding wound from a battlefield injury. Your doctor, a grizzled old man with a pouch of herbs, doesn't reach for a bandage. He reaches for a set of tongs holding a red-hot iron. He's about to cauterize your wound, and the smell of sizzling flesh fills the air. It's a terrifying, brutal, and horrifyingly effective procedure. The principle is simple. Use extreme heat to seal blood vessels and stop severe bleeding. This was a common practice in ancient and medieval times, and it was the best option for controlling a hemorrhage. The intense heat would instantly destroy tissue and seal the blood vessels, preventing the patient from bleeding out. This was especially important on a battlefield where blood loss was a primary cause of death. But here's the best part. The searing heat also had a powerful antiseptic effect. It would kill off bacteria and other microbes that could cause a fatal infection. In an age before antibiotics, this was a huge deal. It was a crude form of sterilization that, while excruciating, could prevent the wound from becoming gangrenous. So, while you were screaming and praying for a quick end, that red-hot iron was doing two things at once. It was saving you from bleeding to death and simultaneously giving your immune system a fighting chance against infection. That's all for today. Stay tuned for similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.